Reverend Stephen G. Adkins. He is a medium, healer, teacher, and certified ordained minister in Cassadaga. He has demonstrated throughout the United States and the United Kingdom for well over 20 plus years. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Reverend Stephen G. Adkins.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Personal recording here. Sometimes the camp doesn't get it right. So. The song that you heard just before I got up, it's kind of interesting because when I used to lecture in the church years ago, Ben Cox was the musician, and he's the one that recorded this music. He's passed the spirit a couple of years ago, but he used to always know what songs I wanted. They'd already be up there ready to go, so he recorded this one just so it would be there when I got up to speak. The other part of that song is that's the song that the band played on the Titanic when it was going down. And these musicians played this out of the goodness of their heart, doing what they love to do to try to bring what little calm they could to a desperate situation. So when you look at it like that, it's just a wonderful feeling to feel that love and that hope that's expressed by that song. I'm going to speak a little bit today about the philosophy of spiritualism. Too many times, too much attention is paid to the phenomena, the mediumship, and the healing. The biggest benefit that spiritualism has is to share the philosophy that it has, because that helps the individual. The expressions of mediumship and healing are just proofs of part of the philosophy of spiritualism. What mediumship does is it proves the existence of eternal life after death. And what healing proves is an infinite intelligence that acts benevolently towards this world through changing cellular structure beyond physical science. So that's the purpose of those two. It's not the cornerstone of the faith at all. One of the cornerstones of the faith is personal responsibility, because that creates spiritual awakening within people. And the term spiritual awakening is a little bit of a misleading term, because it's not once saved, always saved type of philosophy. All spiritual awakening does is open a lens for you to see things in a different perspective, if you choose to. It opens another way for you to see things. But you have to employ personal responsibility to that, to bring it in when things are distressing, to bring it in when things are challenging, and to bring it in when you need to put forth nothing but trust and your personal faith in it to move past what you're on. I can remember when I had my spiritual awakening, it was about 26 days into a 28-day detox program when I was 35. I haven't had a drink since then, but it hasn't been without daily choices, daily perceptions of things. So when I use the word spiritual awakening, it's not this blinding light that shines down, removes all the ills of the world, and makes you feel perfectly happy about every aspect of your life. That's not spiritual awakening. What it does is it allows you to see things and process things in a little bit different fashion than through your conscious mind, your instincts, and your emotions. It adds another perspective to that allows you to make an informed decision. Because along with the philosophy that I learned when I was in that detox center, and I carried on pursuing it for a number of years, was don't become so heavenly or no earthly good. Because it's real easy to, shine it on and God's going to take care of it. There's a famous scene in a movie, Oh God, and at the end of it, the actors was asking that God help him to get his life right. And God said, don't ask for a miracle, be the miracle. Be the change in your life. Be the change about you, no matter how small it is. Reach out and be that change. If it's picking up trash by the roadside, if it's changing to where instead of packaged meals, you buy whole meals and lessen the trash that's around. Don't look to some big body of influence to do this for you. Make your own effort. Make your own effort in your own life, and opportunities present itself for you to expand on that, whether it's small things or big things. Take the personal effort, take the personal step. Personal responsibility requires you to be self-referral, like Deepak Chopra says. We're in the middle of the third age of spiritualism right now, as prophesized by one of the very founding members of our movement, Emma Hardinge Britton. She was an American medium that took it to the UK. And in the UK, she actually was put under a lot of challenges and a lot of distress. But she did end up helping them to form their spiritualist faith. Because in the UK, they had something on the books called the Witchcraft Act until 1965, where people could be jailed, fined, or any number of things for predicting the future, for practicing the arcane arts, so to speak. And what Emma Hardinge Britton did was help the movement to define what mediumship was and what it was not. And when they got to that point, it's one of the first religions in existence that was declared a religion by an act of Parliament. They created spiritualism. They removed them from the Witchcraft Act by this woman's inspirational leading and guidance and prophetic views. And what she said was there was 3 ages of spiritualism. The first age was the age of phenomena, in which we saw the trances, all of the cabinet works and stuff. That's all it was in the beginning. I'm not saying that doesn't happen to a lesser degree now, but that's all it was back then. And then it transitioned into the era of the mental medium and the physical healers. And that's the era that we're in now, transitioning into the third age, where the individual themselves becomes aware of that inherent ability to reach the spirit realm, to communicate directly with the spirit realm and the God of their understanding. There's no intermediaries required anymore. Not mediums, not healers, not anything else between you and your understanding of God and the spirit realm. You open your mind with hope and trust, and it's responded to in that kind. And it doesn't matter if the way you put it together in your mind is different than you hear it on TV, different than you hear me talking about it up here, different than anybody else. That's your perception. That's how the God of your understanding is guiding you to do that. Trust it, embrace it, and follow it where it leads. And it will produce the awakening that is there for you as the individual spirit that you are, that God wants you to be. Not be somebody else's acolyte, be somebody else's this or that. God wants you to be who you are and designed to be, the individual that you are. So if you think of things like that a little differently than other people, good on you, because you're bringing out who you are. You know, stick with it. Don't give up on it. The other part of personal responsibility is that it removes you from being bound by other people's ideas about you. Even when people do things of an unkind nature or challenging nature to you, if you're approaching it from personal responsibility, you're not moved by that person's intentions. You're not moved by that person's perceptions of you. You are moved by your own self-referral of who you are as a spiritual being and who you choose how you choose to react to that situation. Don't let other people determine how you react to situations. And by settling in yourself and being driven by your own convictions, your own perceptions of what's going on, you keep yourself from being moved by their intentions and by their ideas of who you are. And that's strictly by being seated in the idea of who you are through your own responsibility and through your own perception of who you are. You begin to learn to do that self-referral, thinking of who I am, what I am. And that's a double-edged sword, because sometimes you have to face parts of you that aren't that pleasant. Somebody will say something to you, yeah, you know, blah, 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 and you're going, yeah, that's pretty much on target. And you're sitting there looking at yourself a little bit. So personal responsibility isn't just cutting outward, it cuts inward too. And it's a continual evolutionary development. Because as I've said with Emma Hardinge Britton, spiritualism evolves forward, and so does the spirituality of people and their ability to understand the other side of life. When you look way back in the beginnings of recorded history and religion, most indigenous races worship nature. They worship the mountains. They worship what was beyond their ability to understand by their education. It was greater than them, so it filled them with awe and made them want to move forward. Well, in today's era, the average person's pretty well educated and doesn't believe that, God may have created the mountains, but there's not that mystical of a thing about them. It does fill you with awe. It does fill you with a sense of grandeur without a doubt. But it doesn't do that for you at making you want to worship it or think it's a deity. And the same thing with religious perspectives. I was raised Roman Catholic, and I'm still a recovering Catholic today. So my family's wonderful. They're all just about Catholic, and they're great people, so I'm not downing any religion. But it has evolved forward in its understanding. It's not fixed. And spiritualism is an evolutionary religion. It's not a fixed religion. What we give is the 9 principles you read at the beginning are guidelines for living. They're not inflexible commandments, not to be broken or else. They're guidelines that have been produced over 200 years of the religious progress of this religion, and it's to guide you, not to bind you. What you need to do with that is to just take it in and, again, allow people the right to. Something else I learned when I was in recovery was the biggest thing that allowed me to get out of myself was and not be controlled by other people's attitude, was to allow other people the right to be mistaken. And that was driven into me time and time again by the counselors in that center. It's not my job to point out everybody's faults or to decide everybody's wrong and prove to them that I'm right. I have an inner conviction that I'm right, and I act on that. Doesn't matter if anybody else agrees with it, if anybody else pats me on the back for it. You're driven by your own convictions, and that's what you have to be. Even when you're on a difficult path, if you understand who you are and what you are, and you're facing personal responsibility. Even when I was a pure hedonist and hellraiser, I still knew what I was. I never made excuses for what I did. I didn't blame it on anything. Didn't blame it on my tough life. And I had a pretty darn tough life, believe me. But I never blamed it on that. I said, I just want to party and I want to raise hell, and I'm going to have me as many drinks as I want when I sit down to drink. But when I gave it up in 35, I was ready to give it up. It wasn't getting me where I wanted to get anymore. And that was the personal responsibility, the honesty that I had, even though I was on a destructive path. I realized it wasn't getting me any further in my life. And I had the higher forces intervene, which was my family and my brothers, that forcibly escorted me to a detox center that was a locked-up detox center. That was their part. My part was participating, and it took 24 or so days of 28 before I started participating, so it did happen. And as you move forward with that, you have to, again, just be consistently aware of that which drives you. Be honest with that which drives you to yourself. It's not this idea of, well, God says this is honest, and my pastor says this is honest. God, be driven by what you internally are comfortable with, what you internally can accept, because God works with you and the spirit realm works with you when you are honest with yourself. They will give you ideas about things, new perspectives, and you just keep moving forward one step at a time. The other thing they told me in that was, again, there's no blinding light that suddenly says you're there. I have arrived. That doesn't happen. It's one day at a time. You get into this trouble one day at a time. You get out of this trouble one day at a time. But there's a big difference between falling into the darkness and climbing out of the pit. Big difference in that attitude. When you're climbing out of the pit, you feel the success of each effort, of each conclusion, of each step forward. You feel that success. When you're falling down that hole, you just get deeper and deeper into the depression and into the addiction that drives you there, whether it's emotional or chemical. So there's a big difference in the two. They used to always tell you, you're not climbing towards heaven, you're backing out a hill, so stick with it. And at some point, you become comfortable with that. You become comfortable with realizing that you're making headway, that you're succeeding one step at a time. And that all boils back down to personal responsibility, which is the cornerstone of the spiritualist philosophy. Drawing that line in the sand and knowing that that's your part on this side. And that's the problem with spiritual people, is sometimes they want to take on the whole responsibility. Well, it's all mine, give it all to me, I can handle it, I got God with me. Next thing they know, when they're getting dragged out from underneath of it and picked up and dusted off, they realize that's not how it works. You don't interfere with God's plan for other people. You take your part of it and let that other part progress forward with the other people. It's just like when you decide to forgive somebody. That's a big thing right there. Forgiveness is a spiritual act. It's a virtue. You forgive first and understand second, unfortunately. You don't understand first and then decide to forgive. It don't quite work like that. You forgive because it's the virtuous and spiritual thing to do. Now that doesn't mean prostrate yourself on the floor, let them have another go at you. That's not forgiving somebody. Forgiving somebody, in my mind, I remember when I was sitting in some of those meetings, they were saying, pray for somebody when they make you angry and upset, because I was what they call a 1%er. I was a violent drunk when I drank. Never towards my family, but God helped the other people in the bar, you know. Or God helped me if they were the right person that I ran into. So, but, you know, you can't ever, these drugs I'm taking some gabapentin, so sometimes I lose my flow here, so I apologize. But, you know, within all of this, you have to realize that, again, you have to sit in your own mind and move into that sense of personal responsibility. What happens, as I started to speak about in the beginning, with all of these religions progressing forward, is your knowledge increases with what goes on in your life. Everything you see, everything you do affects you in some fashion. So as you move forward, your perception begins to broaden. And as that happens, you take in more and more knowledge. You hear somebody tell you this, you hear the priest tell you that, you hear the news tell you this. And what you have to do is you have to take all that knowledge and distill it down into personal wisdom. Now, the difference between wisdom and knowledge is kind of like the difference between knowing the difference between a tomato and fruit. A tomato is a fruit, but you don't put it in a fruit salad. And that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Wisdom is what it turns into when you practice it to the world around you, and you get back those experiences, and you know how to apply all of this learning, all of this inspiration. You begin to learn it personally in your own life. You can help other people by giving them encouragement of how you've lived your life. But their life is just a little different than yours. They'll take a little bit of encouragement about how to move forward, but they can't take the same steps as you. And you can't expect them to take the same steps as you. Nor can you demand that they take the same steps as you. Speaking as a parent of a dependent child who went through drug addiction a little bit, I can tell you a little bit about that. All you can do is love them, encourage them. Don't help them be destructive to themselves, but help them be productive to themselves. So within all of this, you still have to move day at a time, step by step, as you're inspired, and as the opportunity presents itself to you. As I get ready to close, I always like to close with a little bit of a joke. Make it a little lighter. there was this this preacher, pastor, and he loved two things in life to the fullest extent: golf and preaching the gospel. And he had this huge church, well-known man, very famous, kind of like, I'm not saying it's Joel Osteen, but it was kind of like him, big man, big, you know, a big church. And one Sunday, golf got the better of him. So I had to go way over 2 or 3 cities away where nobody knew him to play golf. So he's down on the golf course, and he had his assistant pastor take over. So he's sitting there teeing up on the golf course. He hits the ball, and it's almost a hole in one, not quite. He's just stunned because he's feeling guilty about not being there, you know, preaching the word of the gospel. So we flash up to heaven, and here's God and Michael the Archangel up. There's my old Catholic religion coming back in. And Michael the Archangel saying to God, he says, aren't you going to punish him for that? He says, I got it under control. So they're watching him play golf, and this guy's, he's making birdies and he gets up to the 18th hole, and he rears off, and he hits it, and it's like a par 4, and he gets a hole in one. And he is gone crazy, throwing it, just ecstatic, the game of his life. He can't believe it. And Michael the Archangel looks at God and he says, I thought you had this under control. He says, I do. Who's he going to tell? Thank you, Lord.